Princess Zara stood in the middle of the grand crystal chamber, her hands shaking slightly as hundreds of eyes stared down at her. The walls of the courtroom sparkled like diamonds, but today they felt more like a prison. She had never imagined she would be standing here as the accused, facing the most powerful leaders of her planet. The air felt heavy with disappointment and anger. Her father, Emperor Theon, sat on his golden throne, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past week. His usually warm eyes now looked cold and distant. Next to him, her mother, Empress Lyra, kept her face completely blank, but Zara could see the pain hidden behind her calm expression. "Princess Zara of the House of Veltara," announced the chief judge, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand accused of breaking the most sacred law of our empire, the law that has kept our people safe and strong for over 1,000 years." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew exactly what law they were talking about. The Sacred Decree stated that no Veltarian could help or interact with humans without official permission. Humans were considered a lower species, dangerous and unpredictable. Her people believed that any contact with them would weaken their own advanced civilization. But Zara had never believed this was right. 3 weeks ago, she had discovered a group of human families hiding in the outer caves of their planet. These weren't soldiers or invaders. They were simple people, miners and their children who had escaped from a terrible work camp on a nearby moon. They were hungry, scared, and some were badly injured. When Zara first saw them, her heart broke. There was a little human girl, maybe 6 years old, crying because her mother was sick with fever. An old man was trying to share his small piece of bread with everyone, even though he was clearly starving himself. These people weren't monsters. They weren't dangerous. They were just families trying to survive. Against everything she had been taught, Zara decided to help them. She secretly brought them food, medicine, and warm clothes. She used her royal access codes to arrange safe transport to a peaceful planet where they could start new lives. For 3 beautiful weeks, she felt like she was doing something truly good with her privileged position. But someone had been watching. "We have evidence," continued the chief judge, "that you not only provided aid to these creatures but also used royal resources to relocate them. You put our entire planet at risk of discovery by their kind." Zara wanted to speak up, to tell them that the humans were grateful and kind, that the little girl had drawn her a picture as a thank you gift, that the old man had blessed her in his human language, tears streaming down his face. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Her people's minds were already made up about humans. "What do you say to these charges?" the judge asked. Zara lifted her chin proudly. "I helped people who needed help. I'm not sorry for that." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even her younger sister, Princess Kira, looked shocked from where she sat in the royal section. This was not how a Veltarian princess was supposed to respond. They expected shame, regret, and promises to never do it again. But Zara felt none of those things. Her father finally spoke, his voice heavy with sadness. "Zara, my daughter, you have always been different. When you were small, you cried when we had to destroy pest creatures in the palace gardens. You asked too many questions about other worlds and other peoples. We thought you would grow out of this weakness." The word weakness hit Zara like a physical blow. Her own father was calling her compassion a weakness. "We have tried to guide you, to help you understand your duties as a princess," the emperor continued. "But today proves that you are not fit to rule over our people. You would put emotional feelings above the safety and purity of our race." The chief judge stood up, holding a golden scroll. "Princess Zara, by the power granted to us by the sacred laws, we sentence you to permanent exile from Veltara." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Exile was rare, usually reserved for the worst criminals. For a princess to be exiled was almost unheard of. But the judge wasn't finished. "However," he said, waiting for silence, "because you are of royal blood, we will not simply cast you out into space to die. Instead, you will be bound in marriage to one of the very creatures you chose to protect. You will live among the humans on their primitive planet Earth, as one of them, for the rest of your natural life." Zara felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Marriage to a human? Living on Earth forever? She had studied human culture in school, but only to understand their weaknesses. Earth was described as a chaotic, dirty world full of violence and ignorance. The marriage bond, once activated, cannot be broken without the consent of both parties, the judge explained with satisfaction. This ensures you cannot simply abandon your punishment and return to civilized society. You will truly become what you have chosen to protect, a lowly human. Her mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Is there no other way?" "The sentence has been decided," the judge replied firmly. "Princess Zara has 48 hours to prepare for her new life. The transport ship will take her to Earth, where a suitable human male has already been selected for the marriage contract." As the court began to dismiss, Zara caught her father's eye one last time. For just a moment, she thought she saw regret there. But then he looked away, unable to meet her gaze. That night, Zara sat in her private garden for what she knew would be the last time. The beautiful bioluminescent flowers that had been her childhood companions seemed to sense her sadness. They glowed with soft blue and purple lights, responding to her emotions as they always had. She touched the petals of her favorite flower, a rare bloom that only grew in the royal gardens. It had been a gift from her grandmother, who had always encouraged Zara's curiosity about other worlds. If her grandmother were still alive, would she understand why Zara had helped those human families? Zara spent hours recording a message for her sister Kira. She wanted to warn her to hide her own kind heart, to never let the council see that she too sometimes questioned their harsh ways. But mostly, she wanted Kira to know that even facing this punishment, Zara didn't regret helping those families. As the two suns of Veltara began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Zara made herself a promise. She would face this punishment with dignity. She would go to Earth and fulfill the marriage contract as required. But she would never let them break her spirit or make her believe that showing kindness was wrong. She didn't know it yet, but this punishment that was meant to be the worst thing that could happen to her would actually become the greatest gift of her life. Sometimes the things that seem like endings are really just new beginnings in disguise. The princess packed her few, allowed belongings, said goodbye to the only home she had ever known, and prepared to discover what it truly meant to be human. Dr. David Chen was having the worst month of his life. His research funding had been cut, his equipment was failing, and the bank was threatening to take away his small observatory. He sat alone in his lab, surrounded by star charts and broken computers, wondering if he should just give up on his dream of finding life beyond Earth. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, desperately searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, while his own life was falling apart. His wife, Anna, had died 3 years ago from cancer, and since then, he'd thrown himself into his work to avoid dealing with the pain. But now even his work was slipping away. It was past midnight when the impossible happened. A soft blue light filled his laboratory, growing brighter and brighter until David had to shield his eyes. When the light faded, a woman was standing in the middle of his lab, right next to his main telescope. She was tall and elegant, with unusual silver-white hair and the strangest violet eyes he'd ever seen. "Please don't be afraid," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't identify. "I need your help." David's first thought was that someone was playing an elaborate prank on him. Maybe his colleague Tom had hired an actress to cheer him up. But as he looked closer, he noticed things that didn't make sense. The woman's clothes seemed to be made of some kind of fabric that shifted color in the light. And there was a small device on her wrist that was definitely not from any Earth technology he knew. "How did you get in here?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The doors are all locked." The woman, who introduced herself simply as Zara, reached into what looked like a small pouch and pulled out a golden scroll. But as David stared at it, the strange symbols on the paper began to rearrange themselves, forming words he could actually read. "This is a marriage contract," Zara explained, her voice formal and distant. "I am required to marry a human male as part of a legal arrangement from my people. You have been selected as a suitable candidate." David nearly laughed out loud. "A marriage contract? Lady, I don't know what kind of scam this is, but—" He stopped talking when Zara noticed a small cut on his hand from where he'd scraped it on a broken piece of equipment earlier. Without asking permission, she touched a small crystal device to the wound. David watched in amazement as the cut healed completely in just a few seconds, not even leaving a scar. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at his perfectly healed hand. "Many things that seem impossible are simply beyond current human understanding," Zara replied. "I am not from your world, Dr. Chen. I am from a planet called Veltara, many light years from here." David's legs felt weak, and he had to sit down. His entire life had been dedicated to proving that life existed beyond Earth, and now that proof was standing in his laboratory offering to marry him. "Why me?" he managed to ask. Zara's expression softened slightly. "The selection process focused on humans who live alone, have no close family ties, and work in fields related to space science. You were identified as someone who would be less likely to cause complications." It stung a little to hear his lonely life described so clinically, but David understood. He really was the perfect candidate. No family to ask questions, no close friends who would worry, and already obsessed with the possibility of alien life. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" David said. "The contract requires only legal marriage documentation," Zara explained. "You would receive substantial financial compensation, enough to save your research facility and fund your work for many years. In return, you provide me with legal human identity and a place to live. No other obligations are required." David looked around his failing laboratory, at the stack of unpaid bills on his desk, at the foreclosure notice he'd been trying to ignore. This mysterious woman was offering him a way to save everything he cared about. But it felt too strange, too unreal. "I need time to think," he said. "I understand," Zara replied. "But I must have an answer within 3 days. If you refuse, another candidate will be selected." Over the next few days, David found himself watching Zara carefully. She stayed in a small hotel in town, but she visited his lab each day to answer his questions. Her knowledge of astronomy and physics was incredible. She could explain complex concepts that human scientists were still debating. When he asked about her home planet, her eyes would get distant and sad. "Why were you really sent here?" David asked on the second day. "This isn't just about marriage contracts, is it?" Zara was quiet for a long time. "I made choices that my people considered wrong," she finally said. "This marriage is my punishment." "What did you do?" "I helped people who needed help," she said simply. "My people believed I should have let them suffer instead." Something in her voice reminded David of his own struggles with loss and loneliness. Here was someone else who had been judged for caring too much, for trying to do the right thing even when it cost them everything. On the third day, David made his decision. The wedding ceremony was small and awkward. Just David, Zara, the local judge, and David's friend Tom, who kept staring at Zara like he was trying to figure out what was different about her. The judge pronounced them married, they signed the papers, and suddenly David had a wife from another planet. Zara moved into the spare bedroom of David's small cabin near the observatory. She was polite but distant, always asking permission before using anything, never taking up more space than absolutely necessary. She seemed fascinated by simple things, the way Earth's weather changed unpredictably, the variety of plants, in his small garden, even the way his old coffee maker worked. "On my world, everything is controlled and predictable," she explained one morning as she watched clouds form and disappear in the sky. "Your planet is so chaotic, but also beautiful in ways I never expected." David found himself looking forward to their morning conversations. Zara asked thoughtful questions about his research, and her different perspective often gave him new ideas. She never talked down to him or made him feel stupid, even though her civilization was obviously far more advanced than Earth's. "Why do you search for life on other worlds?" she asked one evening as they watched the sunset from his porch. "Because I've always believed we're not alone in the universe," David said. "I wanted to prove that there are other intelligent beings out there, other ways of thinking and living." Zara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "And now you know you were right." As weeks passed, David realized that having Zara around was changing his life in unexpected ways. She encouraged him to take better care of himself, to eat regular meals, to get enough sleep. She was genuinely interested in his work and his dreams. For the first time since Anna's death, David didn't feel completely alone. He began to wonder what terrible thing Zara could have done to deserve such punishment. Because from where he was sitting, having her in his life was starting to feel less like helping a refugee and more like receiving an unexpected gift. Neither of them realized it yet, but they were both about to discover that sometimes the most life-changing journeys begin with the smallest acts of kindness. 3 months had passed since Zara arrived on Earth, and life had settled into a comfortable routine. Every morning she would make coffee with mathematical precision while David checked his equipment. They would eat breakfast together, discussing his research or her observations about Earth's strange weather patterns. It was peaceful, but Zara still felt like she was living behind a wall of politeness and careful distance. Then winter arrived with a fury that caught them both off guard. The storm hit on a Tuesday night, bringing howling winds and temperatures that dropped far below anything David's old cabin was prepared for. The power went out around midnight, and by morning, snow was piled up against the windows like white prison walls. David woke up feeling terrible. His head was pounding, his throat felt like sandpaper, and every breath seemed to burn his lungs. He tried to get up to check the backup generator, but his legs felt like water, and he collapsed back onto his bed, shivering despite the fever that was making him feel like he was on fire. "David?" Zara's voice came from outside his bedroom door. "The heating system has stopped working. Do you know how to—" She stopped talking when she pushed the door open and saw him lying there, his face flushed red and his breathing shallow and quick. Zara had been trained in basic medical knowledge, as all Veltarian royalty were, but she had never seen a human this sick before. David's condition was clearly serious, much more serious than he realized. Without modern medical care, this kind of lung infection could easily become life-threatening. For a moment, she stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing. She had a medical device hidden in her belongings, a small crystal healing unit that could cure almost any illness in minutes. But using it would mean revealing more of her true nature to David. It would mean crossing the careful line she had drawn between them. Then David tried to speak and started coughing so violently that she could see specks of blood on his lips. The decision made itself. Zara rushed to her room and retrieved the medical device from its hiding place. When she returned, David was barely conscious, mumbling words that didn't make sense. She activated the crystal unit and placed it on his chest, watching as it began to glow with soft blue light. "Anna," David whispered, his eyes unfocused. "Anna, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I tried so hard, but the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. Zara's hands stilled on the medical device. Anna, the name David had mentioned once when he was talking about his previous research. She had assumed Anna was a colleague, but now she understood. Anna had been his wife. "I miss you so much," David continued, his fever making him speak truths he usually kept buried. "Every day I wake up and for just a second I forget you're gone. I keep thinking you'll walk into the kitchen and laugh at how messy I've made everything." Tears started rolling down his cheeks, and Zara felt something crack open in her chest. This was why David lived alone in this remote place. This was why he threw himself into his work with such desperate intensity. He wasn't just searching for life among the stars. He was running from the life he'd lost here on Earth. The medical device finished its work, and David's breathing became steady and deep. His fever broke, and the dangerous infection was completely gone. But Zara stayed beside his bed, listening as he talked about Anna in his sleep. He spoke about their first meeting at a science conference, how Anna had challenged his theories and made him think in completely new ways. He talked about their wedding day, when it rained so hard they had to move the ceremony inside, but Anna said it was perfect because it meant they were starting their life together by dancing through storms. Most painfully, he talked about Anna's final months when cancer stole her strength bit by bit. How he had spent every penny they had on treatments that didn't work. How he had held her hand as she died, promising to keep searching for the wonders of the universe that had always fascinated them both. "She would have loved meeting you," David whispered to the empty air. "She always said that if we ever found proof of life beyond Earth, it would change everything. She would have had a million questions for you." Zara realized with a shock that David was talking to her, even in his fevered state somehow knowing she was there. For 3 days, Zara didn't leave David's side. She kept the fire burning, made simple soups that would help him regain his strength, and listened as he slowly came back to full consciousness. When he was finally well enough to sit up and take notice of his surroundings, she could see the embarrassment in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I must have said some pretty strange things while I was sick." "You talked about Anna," Zara said gently. "She sounded like an amazing person." David's face went through several emotions before settling on a kind of peaceful sadness. "She was. She died 3 years ago. That's why I moved out here, away from everything that reminded me of her. I thought if I buried myself in work, the pain would go away." "But it didn't," Zara observed. "No, it just got lonelier." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall outside the window. Finally, David asked the question Zara had been dreading. "How did I get better so fast? I was really sick, wasn't I? I should have been in the hospital." Zara chose her words carefully. "Sometimes the human body is more resilient than we expect." David studied her face, and she could see him putting pieces together in his mind. "You helped me somehow, didn't you? With some kind of technology from your world." There was no point in lying anymore. "Yes." "Why?" "The contract didn't require you to take care of me when I was sick. You could have just called for human medical help." It was a fair question, and Zara found herself struggling to answer it. Why had she risked exposure to save him? Why had she spent 3 days and nights worrying about someone who was supposed to be just a convenient arrangement? "Because," she said slowly, "you're not just a contract to me anymore. You're my friend." The word felt strange on her tongue. Friendship wasn't really a concept that existed in Veltarian royal society. There were alliances, partnerships, political arrangements, but the idea of caring about someone simply because you enjoyed their company, because their happiness mattered to you for no strategic reason, that was entirely human and entirely wonderful. David smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since Anna's name had come up. "I'd like that. Being friends, I mean. That evening, David did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He went to the old piano that had been sitting silent in the corner of his living room, Anna's piano, and began to play. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, full of love and loss and hope all mixed together. Anna's favorite song, he explained when he noticed Zara listening intently. Without thinking, Zara began to hum along, her voice adding harmonies that her people called soul singing, a way of expressing emotions too deep for ordinary words. The combination of human piano and Veltarian vocals created something neither of them had ever heard before, something that seemed to heal old wounds and open new possibilities. When the song ended, they looked at each other with a new understanding. They were no longer strangers fulfilling a contract. They were two people who had found something precious in each other's company, something that neither of them had expected when this strange arrangement began. For the first time since leaving her home planet, Zara wondered if being sent to Earth might not have been a punishment after all. Maybe it was a gift in disguise. 6 months had changed everything between David and Zara, though neither of them wanted to admit just how much. What had started as a simple business arrangement had quietly transformed into something that felt dangerously close to a real partnership. Their mornings now began with genuine laughter instead of polite conversation. David had taught Zara how to drive his old pickup truck, and she had quickly become better at it than he was, though she pretended not to notice when he gripped the door handle during her perfectly executed turns. She had learned to cook human food, creating fusion dishes that combined Earth ingredients with techniques from her home world that somehow made everything taste extraordinary. In return, Zara had begun sharing carefully disguised insights about astronomy that had revolutionized David's research. She would frame her advanced knowledge as interesting theories, or what if we considered this possibility. David's recent papers were gaining attention from major universities, though he had no idea that his sudden breakthrough ideas were coming from someone who had actually visited the star systems he was studying. But it was the small moments that really mattered. The way Zara would bring David coffee without being asked when she noticed him working late. How David had started buying the strange herbal teas that Zara preferred, even though they cost 3 times more than regular tea. The comfortable silences they shared while reading in the evenings, both of them stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. Zara had started keeping a secret journal, writing in her native language about experiences she never could have imagined before coming to Earth. She wrote about David's kindness, his patience in teaching her about human customs, the way his face lit up when he discovered something new in his research. Most confusing of all, she wrote about the strange warmth that spread through her chest whenever he smiled at her, or the way her heart would speed up when their hands accidentally touched. On Veltara, emotions like these were considered primitive and dangerous. Royal marriages were arranged for political benefit, and love was seen as a weakness that clouded judgment. But here on Earth, surrounded by David's gentle presence and the wild beauty of this chaotic planet, Zara was beginning to understand why humans valued love so highly. The turning point came during a camping trip that David had suggested to observe a meteor shower. They drove up into the mountains, far from any city lights, and set up a small camp beside a crystal-clear lake. As the sun set, painting the sky in colors that reminded Zara of her home world, David built a fire while she assembled their telescope. "I still can't believe how beautiful your planet is," Zara said as they lay on their backs, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "Every day I discover something new that amazes me." "Even after 6 months?" David asked, turning his head to look at her. "I would have thought you'd be homesick by now." Zara was quiet for a long moment. The truth was, she rarely thought about Veltara anymore. Oh, she missed certain things. The singing crystals in the royal gardens, The way the twin suns created rainbow effects in the waterfalls, the deep conversations she used to have with her sister Kira. But she no longer felt the sharp ache of exile that had consumed her during her first weeks on Earth. "I miss my family," she said carefully. "But this place, your world has taught me things I never could have learned at home." "Like what?" Zara struggled to put her feelings into words. "On my world, everything is planned and controlled. We know what we're supposed to do, who we're supposed to be, what our lives will look like from birth to death. But here, people make choices based on what they feel in their hearts. They take risks for love, for dreams, for the simple hope that tomorrow might be better than today." David was quiet, absorbing her words. Finally, he said, "Zara, I need to tell you something." Her heart stopped. Had he figured out more about her true identity? Was he about to end their arrangement? "These past 6 months," David continued, his voice soft and uncertain, "they've been the happiest I've felt since Anna died. Having you here, sharing meals with you, talking about the stars together, it's helped me remember what it feels like to be alive instead of just existing." Zara felt tears gathering in her eyes, though she couldn't explain why. "I know our arrangement was supposed to be temporary and practical," David went on, "but I've been wondering, hoping, really, that maybe you might consider staying. Not because of the contract, but because you want to. Because this feels as right to you as it does to me." The words hit Zara like a meteor strike. David wasn't just asking her to extend their business arrangement. He was asking her to choose him, to choose this life, to choose love over duty for the second time. "David, she started to say, but couldn't finish. How could she explain that she wanted nothing more than to say yes, but that staying would mean living a lie forever? How could she tell him that she was falling in love with him when her very presence in his life was based on deception? "You don't have to answer right now," David said quickly, misreading her hesitation. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." They watched the meteor shower in charged silence, each bright streak across the sky feeling like a wish that neither of them dared to make out loud. When they finally went to sleep in their separate tents, both of them lay awake thinking about all the things they wanted to say, but couldn't. The next morning brought unexpected visitors and unwelcome news. Dr. Rachel Kim, David's colleague from the university, arrived at the cabin with a worried expression and a folder full of disturbing reports. She had been monitoring satellite data as part of her own research when she discovered something that made her drive 4 hours to warn David in person. "There have been unusual energy readings coming from this area for months," Rachel explained, spreading printouts across David's kitchen table. "The patterns don't match anything in our databases. The government is starting to ask questions, David. They think someone might be testing experimental technology out here." Zara felt ice form in her stomach. Her concealed alien devices, the ones she used for communication with her home world and occasional medical emergencies, had been detected. She had been so careful, but apparently not careful enough. "What kind of questions?" David asked, though Zara could see in his eyes that he was already putting pieces together. "The kind that end with black SUVs and people in suits asking uncomfortable questions," Rachel said grimly. "I managed to delay the investigation by filing some paperwork claiming it might be related to my own research, but I can't stall them forever. Maybe a week, 2 at most." After Rachel left, David and Zara sat in heavy silence. Finally, David spoke. "It's your technology, isn't it? Whatever devices you brought from your world, they're what the satellites are detecting." Zara nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "You have to leave," David said quietly. "If the government finds you here, finds out what you really are." "I know," Zara whispered. But even as she said it, her heart was breaking. Leaving meant abandoning the first, real happiness she had ever known. It meant losing David just when she had finally admitted to herself that she loved him. And worst of all, it meant he would never know the truth about how she felt, because telling him would only make leaving harder for both of them. That night, Zara began making preparations to disappear. She would create a story about a family, emergency, gather her hidden technology, and vanish from David's life as suddenly as she had entered it. It was the only way to keep him safe. But as she packed her few belongings, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that running away was exactly the kind of choice the old dutiful princess would have made. The woman she had become during these months with David, the woman who had learned to value love over safety, connection over protocol. She wanted to fight for what they had built together. She just didn't know how to do it without destroying everything. Zara had barely finished packing her belongings when the night sky outside David's cabin began to glow with an eerie blue light. She rushed to the window and felt her heart sink. A Veltarian transport ship was descending through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced cloaking system flickering as it prepared to land. This wasn't supposed to happen. No one from her home world should have been able to find her. David was in his study, working late on research papers, completely unaware that his quiet life was about to be turned upside down. Zara had planned to leave him a letter explaining her sudden departure as a family emergency. Now, there would be no time for gentle lies. The ship landed silently in the clearing behind their cabin, and a figure materialized in a flash of silver light. Zara's breath caught in her throat. It was her younger sister, Princess Kira, still wearing the formal robes of the royal court, but with dirt on her face and exhaustion in her eyes. "Kira?" Zara whispered as she opened the cabin door. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "Sister," Kira said, rushing forward to embrace her. "Thank the stars you're safe. Everything has changed. Father is dead." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. "What? How?" "A military coup 3 days ago," Kira explained quickly, her voice shaking. "General Vex and his supporters killed Father and took control of the Empire. They're planning something terrible. Zara, they want to harvest Earth's resources and eliminate all human life. Your marriage contract means nothing to them. They see you as a traitor to be executed on sight." Before Zara could fully process this devastating news, she heard footsteps behind her. David appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. His eyes went wide as he took in the scene. Zara embracing another woman who looked remarkably similar to her, both speaking in a musical language he'd never heard before, with a strange silver ship glowing in his backyard. "Zara?" David said quietly. "What's happening?" Kira turned to look at David, her violet eyes, so similar to Zara's, studying him with intense curiosity. "So this is the human," she said, switching to English with the same slight accent as her sister. "He's not what I expected." "David," Zara said, her voice filled with pain, "I need to tell you the truth. The whole truth." For the next hour, sitting around David's kitchen table, Zara told him everything. About being a princess of an advanced alien civilization. About helping human refugees and being sentenced to exile as punishment. About her people's belief that humans were inferior beings, unworthy of compassion. David listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just trying to absorb the reality that the woman he had fallen in love with was not only from another world, but royalty from a civilization that considered him barely more than an animal. "But that's not the worst part," Kira continued when Zara finished her story. "The new regime has been monitoring communications from Earth. They've seen the reports Zara was supposed to send about human primitiveness and weakness. Instead, they found something completely different. She activated a small device that projected holographic images into the air above the table. David watched in amazement as he saw Zara's secret journal entries, translated into English. Page after page of observations about human creativity, kindness, resilience, and capacity for love. Your reports about this human and his species have been circulating among our people, Kira told Zara. Many of us, especially the younger generation, have been questioning whether our beliefs about humans are wrong. Your experiences here have inspired a resistance movement back home. A resistance movement? Zara asked. Yes, but it's small and scattered. General Vex knows about it, which is why he's moving quickly with his plan to destroy Earth. He sees humans as a threat to Veltarian supremacy, especially now that some of our people are beginning to see them as equals. David finally found his voice. How long do we have? Maybe a few weeks before the invasion fleet arrives, Kira said grimly. Unless we can stop them. We? Zara asked. The resistance needs a leader, someone with royal blood who can unite the opposition and challenge Vex's authority. They need you, Zara. The weight of the decision settled over them like a heavy blanket. Zara looked between her sister and David, torn between two impossible choices. Stay on Earth with the man she loved and watch both worlds be destroyed, or return to Veltara to lead a revolution that might save everyone, but would mean leaving David forever. You have to go, David said quietly. David, no. You have to go, he repeated, his voice stronger now. You're the only one who can save, your people and mine. How can I ask you to choose my happiness over the lives of billions? Tears were streaming down Zara's face. But if I leave, I can never come back. Vex will have me killed the moment I set foot on Veltarian soil. Then we'll make sure you win, David said simply. Over the next few hours, they planned Zara's return. Kira had brought intelligence about Vex's supporters and the locations of resistance cells throughout the Empire. David, despite having no military experience, proved surprisingly helpful in developing communication strategies and tactical approaches. As dawn approached, it was time for Zara to leave. She stood with David on the porch where they had shared so many quiet evenings, both of them trying to memorize every detail of each other's faces. I love you, Zara said, the words she had been afraid to speak finally breaking free. These months with you have been the happiest of my life. My punishment became my greatest gift. I love you too, David replied, pulling her close. And that's why I know you'll find a way back to me. Love like this doesn't just disappear. They kissed for the first and last time, pouring all their unspoken feelings into that one perfect moment. Then Zara walked away toward the ship, not looking back because she knew her resolve would crumble if she saw David's face again. 6 months later, David was working in his lab when the sky filled with silver light. But this time, it wasn't a single ship. It was an entire fleet, and at the head of it was a vessel bearing the royal insignia of the Veltarian Empire. Zara materialized in his laboratory just as she had a year ago, but everything was different now. She wore the ceremonial robes of an empress, and her eyes sparkled with joy and triumph. The resistance won, she said simply. Vex is dead, and I've been chosen to lead our people into a new era of cooperation with other species. Your empress, now? David asked, hardly daring to believe she was really there. Yes, and my first official act was to establish Earth as a protected world and humans as equals in the galactic community. My second act was to appoint myself as permanent ambassador to Earth. David's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. And what does that mean exactly? It means I'm home to stay if you'll have me. This time, when David asked her to marry him, it wasn't out of necessity or convenience. It was because two people from different worlds had found something rare and precious in each other, a love strong enough to change the course of history. Their second wedding was attended by humans and Veltarians alike, marking the beginning of a new age of friendship between their species. And as they danced under the stars that had brought them together, both David and Zara knew that sometimes the greatest punishments can become the most unexpected gifts. What had started as exile and loneliness had transformed into love and hope. for entire civilizations. The alien princess had indeed found unexpected joy, and in doing so, she had given that same gift to countless others across the stars.